To begin today, what I've asked Julia to help kind of set a solid foundation for us. There's a lot of employment numbers, a lot of statistics out there, but I wanted her to help provide us a few data trends, particularly for Des Moines and for the state. So she's going to help frame up the discussion for us. She's going to go first. After that, I'm going to ask questions for the full panel. But do remember, this is a Q&A with you in the audience, so after that first question or two, I'm going to be opening it up, and as I always say, we've got a couple of roving mics to make sure that everybody can hear the question. But as I always say, if you want to make sure your question gets asked, be that first person, because that's always the hardest person to get to raise their hand. So be ready with those questions. So Julia, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everyone. How close are I?
Go ahead and pull that a little closer. There you go.
Right, for the terminally short. Good morning. So when Chris asked me to pull together a few statistics on what the Iowa labor market looked like and specifically what the Des Moines labor market looked like, one of the things that struck me as I started looking at the Des Moines data in particular is that in many ways it seems like part of what you have is an information problem. Des Moines pays better than a lot of similarly sized Midwest cities. It has lower unemployment, as I'm sure you're all aware. And it showed up on no fewer than 3 separate hipster blogs about the surprising cool places to live. And in some ways, what's striking is that if you ask people about, what is the labor market like in Iowa, you won't get that sort of information. You'll get the information that, there simply isn't a lot of kind of competition on the pay scale. So for instance, a lot of the types of jobs that operate in Des Moines, if you look at the Iowa stats overall, people are getting paid something like 85 to 89 cents to the dollar on the national average. That's after controlling for living expenses. So if you just looked at statistics on Iowa and you weren't thinking about Des Moines specifically, you'd wind up with this picture that certainly fits with what a lot of my students at University of Iowa think, which is that if you want to get paid well, you need to leave Iowa and go somewhere else. So that was the first thing that struck me. More broadly, I would like to comment on, unfortunately I think the simple shortage isn't necessarily kind of a matter of just attempting to get people from Wisconsin to move here. The relatively low unemployment rate is pretty much a Midwest trend. Iowa is a bit lower than average. Des Moines is ever so slightly higher than Iowa overall in terms of its unemployment rates. But there's no obvious pool of people to pull from in the Midwest region. Again, what was striking when you start looking at the city levels, however, was that, again, a lot of these comparably sized cities with pretty comparable labor markets, if you're looking in terms of occupational breakdown, have pretty high unemployment rates. For instance, if you could persuade someone from Kansas City to come out and interview with you, in Kansas City itself, the unemployment rate is on the order of 6%. So, you've got a certain amount of flexibility there. The other thing I also wanted to emphasize is that one of the kind of the stylized facts that most economists will tell you is that the Midwest, or part of the Midwest problem, is that you're losing population. If you look at your age profile of the US overall relative to Iowa specifically, you've got this fabulous little dip for people aged 24 to 35. And that isn't because for some reason people just didn't have babies in a particular decade. It's that a big part of what happens is that the population that grows up here leaves here. And again, when you're thinking about how do you address a labor market, as much as marketing yourself as a company to your existing pool of applicants, it's worth thinking about where do those applicants come from. In some ways, we've got kind of a wider supply side problem. So if you can somehow connect to other labor markets where the supply side is a bit looser, you'll make their lives a lot easier.